I have been reincarnated in a fantasy world, a silent ceiling and candles instead of light bulbs, a fantasy world that lagged behind the civilization I lived in, but I suppose it was a rather wealthy home for someone who had died. This was a decent place to be reincarnated, and with an extremely beautiful mother, it seemed like I wouldn't have any problems in my love life. At the age of 3, I saw the world outside my window for the first time. It was an incredibly vast world. Even considering I was still a child, I discovered that my family was part of a widely known Grand Duchy in the realm, and I was the son of the Dragonia Grand Duke in the Lionheart Kingdom. At the age of 8, I began learning swordsmanship as a future knight of the kingdom, and my master would be a knight dispatched from the palace. I was in the capable hands of the Holy Knight Sir Gothic, or so I thought at that time. At the age of 14, I understood that a holy knight was really a monster hidden in human skin. Sir Gothic forced me to complete missions while I training to become a kingdom knight, to be chosen by the Holy Grail, and as a son of Dragonia, I needed to learn everything to become a great duke. In addition to the rigorous training to become a knight, I had lessons to become the duke's successor, and if there really is a God, I want to ask him to save me. At the age of 16, I roamed the world in order to be recognized by the goddess and become a holy knight. If you continue to accumulate fame and good deeds, she will eventually come to you. There were countless opportunities to wield my sword, and that's why I was always busy. The kingdom had too many enemies. At the age of 20, I met the goddess. She truly existed, and after working as a slave for years, I became a holy knight. After that, I killed orcs, smashed goblins, and eradicated the evil cult. Eventually, I became a kingdom knight with the authority to create my own army. Then I marched with my soldiers to massacre 700,000 orcs, including women and children, but I don't feel bad about those green orcs, because I feel refreshed when I'm killing them. At the age of 35, His Majesty the Holy Arjun Lionheart passed away while fighting the archdemon. The orcs were already a big headache, but now the demons were loose and the kingdom needed to choose a knight to become the successor of the Holy Arjun Lionheart. Amidst all that chaos, the goddess descended upon us to choose me as her successor. It was an honorable position and a lot of work, but I couldn't let down the citizens of the kingdom and the army that followed me. Then I transplanted the goddess's sacred treasure into my body and swore to protect the Holy Grail, and so it was that I, a reincarnated person from another world, became the Grand Duke of Dragonia and the King of the Lionheart Kingdom. At the age of 80, many things happened and there were 3 major wars with the orcs. First, a strange hunchbacked goblin became an archdemon, and then the Empire just created more messed up situations, all this because the Empire had accepted separation from God. Foolish divine separatist, that's what happens when you give human rights to those who don't even deserve to be slaves. I should conquer them all. At the age of 96, the bastards of the Empire finally did it. The Emperor crossed the line and the stupid who claimed not to want to die committed suicide along with 3 million citizens of the capital to invoke the Lord of Chaos. Finally, I gathered the knights with the sacred sword, smeared them with grease from mutilated orcs, and headed to the Empire. At the age of 121, I did what I could, but the world was already completely destroyed. Unlike my wishes, I tried to defeat all evil with the holiness that existed on this continent, but I couldn't stop them and everyone died in vain. Dear Goddess, your lambs are trembling in fear. Women console their crying children by swallowing their tears. Young ones pick up the dying flames of resistance, and knights try to plant seeds of hope in a wasteland soaked in blood. That same winter, we fought the final battle with billions of demons that filled the earth. Barbaric slaves were used as worthy flesh shields, while civilians armed with spears died honorably alongside glorious knights. And finally, your last knight was left. I alone vanquished the demons to the end and destroyed countless demon lords to show those bastards the power of the Holy Knight. In the year 180, winter still had not ended. In the year 233, I destroyed the last remaining demonic gate, and by the year 256, there was nowhere the demons could escape. Poor humble servants of evil, now I wasn't trapped here with them, the reality was those bastards were trapped here with me. Finally, in the year 300, after defeating an archdemon for the last time in this desolate world, it was when I first encountered the Earthlings, and now I, the Lion of Dragonia Lionheart, was no longer alone. The story takes us back to the offices of the Hunters Association in Korea, where the office managers surprised to find a survivor in the world of demons. There were occasions where people managed to survive in the dimensions of destruction that appeared as dungeons in their world. Therefore, the government did everything possible to meet the needs of the survivors and established plans to recruit them into the Hunters Association. The managers were discussing how to recruit our protagonist since they had witnessed his strength and how capable he was of dealing with an archdemon on his own. They saw how the demon was scared and how he destroyed it with a single attack, beheading the demon. They wondered how to handle this survivor who seemed to come from royalty based on the way he referred to himself, but manager Hanhari thought it would be fine, as she trusted in the survivor's voice. Then our king let out a loud shout that shatters the reinforced glass of the interrogation room. He was furious about the mistreatment they had with the glorious name of Lionheart. The scene takes us back 15 minutes where we see our protagonist being interviewed at the Hunters Association. He felt strange since in the world where he was a respected king by everyone. He had to spend more than 200 years hunting demons in an abandoned world, and now he was in a place where he wasn't treated with the respect a king deserved. Our protagonist was investigating whether the interviewer was just a fool or if the government had poor training for its servants. The bald man asked him directly if he had killed all those demons, and the protagonist replied that yes, he did it to protect the honor of all the knights who died in battle. The protagonist asked the bald man to tell him about this world, and the man explained that 30 years ago, dungeons started appearing all over the world, and monsters and demons came out of them, so they had to worry about closing those dungeons by completing missions to clear them. The king seemed concerned because in his world, demons appeared effortlessly every day to attack villages, but in this world, it seemed that a god was giving missions to train humans through tests. He was soon interrupted by the bald man because the food our protagonist ordered had arrived. When the king saw the food, he couldn't help but feel the humiliation. He asked the bald man if it was some kind of joke, and the man told him it was a delicious dish known as soul of the peasants. This was the reason that unleashed our protagonist's anger. He wondered how they dared to offer him a peasant's dish to someone of royalty, the representative of the gods, guardian of the Holy Grail, and owner of the sacred spear. The archenemy of the demons who has killed millions, the incarnation of war reduced to the level of a peasant. The king thought that all of this is because there is no proper faith, and it was his mission to enlighten these foolish peasants. It was his duty as someone from the royal family. Then the scene shows King Lionheart enjoying a steak, and we see the manager asking Hanhari to come in and talk to the protagonist since she was praised at the door for her bravery. Hanhari enters the interrogation room, apologizing for her interruption, and our protagonist recognizes her as the swordswoman from the door and asks her to take a seat. Hanhari asks him if he enjoyed the food, and the king says it was fine, that he could feel the sincerity of the chef, but he clarifies that the reason for their discomfort was not the humble food, it was the attitude they had when receiving a noble from another nation. The king asks her name again and tells her he has heard about this world. Then he asks the girl if the evil demons have appeared in this land, and Hanhari, with the mission of recruiting the king, responds that this is correct. She knows she has to do everything possible to recruit the king, or at least keep him living in Korea, since the great intelligence war of the 21st century is to search for survivors, offer them any kind of support to prevent them from leaving the country. King Lionheart looks at Hanhari and tells her that while he settles in this world, he has the duty to go to the battlefield. It's normal for an honorable knight. Upon seeing the king's response, Hanhari asks him if he was interested in joining the Hunters Association, but the king tells her that he cannot be a soldier of another nation's army. Therefore, the only option is to create a new order of knights in this world. The scene takes us outside the interrogation room where Hanhari asks the manager what the higher budget at the association let them use, and the manager responds that there was nothing they could say. They had to do everything possible to prevent the survivor from joining another guild or leaving the country. An alarm started to sound on the building. It was a dungeon break that was happening in the country's main barn, and it was necessary to break that door to not halt food production. Hanhari comments that the Phoenix Guild was in charge of that door and it was impossible for them not to stop an orange-colored door, but the manager knows that the guild leader had another plan in mind. We see our king sitting in the interrogation room, listening to everything the employees talked about on the other side of the door, and it seemed they would be in trouble if the dungeon infected the soil and crops. The scene takes us to the barn, where the leader of the Phoenix Guild greeting the employees of the Hunter Association. When the manager and Hanhari arrived at the fields, they knew perfectly well that the guild had allowed the dungeon to overflow because they had not accepted their last request to eliminate the tax on profits obtained in their missions, and the manager could not believe that such a large guild as Phoenix was so greedy. We see Hanhari telling the Phoenix that they had to close the dungeon before it overflowed, and the leader says it will be difficult since many of their members are injured. Hanhari accuses the Phoenix leader of his lack of patriotism and that he knows perfectly well what will happen if the lands are infected, but the leader tells the employee not to be so childish since in this world, justice is money and power. King Lionheart approaches to tell the leader that he is quite shallow and that greed is not becoming of a soldier of a kingdom, and the Phoenix asks who this person who looks Western is, but the king tells him to be silent as such a lowly person cannot address him. The leader becomes furious because no one had called him a sycophant before, one of the top 20 S-rank hunters in the world. The leader was about to attack our protagonist but is stopped by Hanhari, who tells him that this person is a survivor. The leader apologizes to the survivor for treating him rudely and introduces himself, but Lionheart tells him that a king is never wrong in his judgment and asks the employees to give him a summary of the situation. Hanhari explains that it is a dungeon outbreak, which occurs when a large amount of demonic element comes out and infects the land. She tells the protagonist that these crops are extremely important for people's survival and that right now demonic energy is infecting the lands, so Lionheart asks how to solve it. Hanhari replies that it is necessary to purify the lands and clean the dungeon as soon as possible. The king says he understands the situation and asks her to call in the association forces since, before the raid deadline ends, he will personally intervene. The girl was glad for the king's help, but Lionheart tells her that before intervening he needs permission from the king of this world since a soldier cannot carry out activities in foreign territory. Hanhari says there is no need to ask permission, but the king tells him that everything has rules and a legitimate process, otherwise, he would not be able to call himself an honorable knight. After a few hours, Hanhari approaches the king to inform him that the preparations are ready and asks how he plans to use them. The king tells her that if his land is infected, it needs to be purified with that straw doll, and our king asks if the women who made the dolls had given birth recently. The king began to examine the dolls made by the women, checking them one by one as they failed to meet the minimum conditions. He broke them on the spot. However, the doll made by an elderly woman caught his attention. The king asked her how many children she had in her life, and she replied that she had 12. The king congratulated her for her patriotism and kissed her hand, apologizing for not awarding her a medal for her courageous act. Then we see Lionheart walking to the infected wheat field and placing the doll on an altar and saying that the conditions for purifying the land had been fulfilled. The king opened a portal from which he took out a golden cup and recited some prayers to Mother Earth. All the presents were confused, but everyone see a strong light coming from the king's cup, filling it with a radiant liquid. Then we see how Lionheart gives a prayer that the sun is rising, a red light is coloring the clouds, a new day wants to begin, and the sun that rises today will be a special beginning for this world. Those were the king's words as everyone watched the water from the cup seeping into the doll that the young king had requested. Lionheart knelt and offered his respects to Mother Earth and the doll that had come to life through the goddess Demera, the god of life and abundance. Greetings to the great Mother Earth, the young king presented. While Demara felt the invasion of evil in these lands, Lionheart told her that there were wicked creatures, but no divinity protected them, and he feared that these vulgar swine might defile her presence, referring to the Phoenix leader. The goddess Demara tells Lionheart that not all greed is judged as a sin because it is inherent in mortals. Then she asks what she will do now. Lionheart responds that sinners mingle among the warriors of this world, but he will ensure to educate the ignorant and guide them on the right path until a new pantheon arises in this land. The goddess asks the king if he has a favor to ask, and he requests that the free citizens who suffer from malevolent energy need to be purified. The goddess Demara quotes a prayer, "You are the head of my temple, our champion. The earth of this world is not my body, but I will spread my divinity here and replace this thirsty land with my blood, so everything that walks upon this land will be your ally." While all the spectators are amazed by this scene, King Lionheart tells them to learn. Ignorant beings who cannot learn, let alone understand, this is a world blessed with the divinity of the goddess to bring light and prosperity, is the duty of a just living being, and this fertile land is the testament to an eternal promise. The leader of the group, furious to see the wheat fields flourishing again, warns everyone not to be fooled, suggesting that the crops might be poisoned. The king Lionheart calls him an arrogant fool and threatens him, warning that he can forgive ignorance once, but he should never defile the name of the goddess again. The leader thought his plan was being ruined because of the survivor, something he couldn't allow, so the guild leader decided to expose his lies and test the cultivation with the intention of accusing him of fraud. The leader decided to provide an appraiser from his guild to review the crops. The Phoenix member conjured an ability to measure the crop's quality and instantly realized that the blessed crops were of a higher rank than any he had seen before. The cultivation could cure third-degree diseases and even cure cancer. The members of the association couldn't believe it. The manager ordered them to fetch a pot to cook rice with the crops. Once the dish was ready, he tasted the food and realized that it was practically a power enhancer, comparable to acquiring a 3,000,001 bottle. Then we see the goddess telling Lionheart that it seems everything he needed to do had been done, so it was time to return. Lionheart expresses gratitude for the divine love the goddess has bestowed upon him, and she offers him one last piece of advice before he departs. She wants to Lionheart make sure to eat well. Hanhari asks our protagonist what just happened in the cultivation field, and the king tells her it's divine power and that if they want a suitable world, it's necessary for earthlings to know that a proper life is made with divine power. Now that everyone was full, they decided to enter the dungeon gate to fulfill their mission. However, the leader of Phoenix remained furious because the survivor had ruined his plans. If Earth continued to deteriorate, the Hunters Association would have been forced to compensate the guild to take action. The guild leader had an idea to eliminate all future worries about the crops. In the group of hunters, there was only one A-rank warrior, Hanhari, and the leader thought that the survivor was probably a support who was weak in combat. The Phoenix believed that they would likely fail because there was a monster inside the dungeon that couldn't be defeated by conventional means. Then the group of hunters enter the portal to prevent it from breaking. Once inside, they explained to our protagonist that the dungeon would close if they defeated the boss. As they walked, King Lionheart noticed that were many monsters than expected, even for a place that had not been cleared before, and Hanhari explained to the young king that this dungeon had the peculiarity of being inhabited by the undead, and as long as the boss remained alive, they would keep reviving. So the king thought it was interesting but considered it a simple task to deal with the leader of the undead. As the hunters group entered the dungeon, a strong energy impacted all its members. It was the Dullahan Knight, who had arrived with an army of thousands of undead to defeat the group of warriors. The group was worried about the number of enemies they faced and didn't know if they would manage to overcome this mission. Quickly the group initiated long-range attacks against the undead army, and the front line prepared their defenses to withstand the impact of the horde of skeletons. We see how hundreds of undead rushed into the attack, colliding with the association's first-line defenders who managed to stop the first wave of the undead. Then the defenders became concerned when a group of necromancers launched their black spells, but even that was stopped by the manager. After successfully blocking the attack, the leader of the undead, the Dullahan Knight, appeared in front of the group's defender. He was riding his underworld horse and swung his sword, striking the manager and shield of the Hunters Association with an unstoppable force. Han Hari, worried about the safety of the manager, watched as the reserve forces struggled to withstand Dullahan's attacks. She thought about King Lionheart and asked for his help to save the manager. The young warrior told her that a king should never join such a minor battle and couldn't believe she was asking for help dealing with those damned weak bones. When the girl realized that King Lionheart wouldn't help, she wasted no time and prepared to jump into the front lines to distract Dullahan while asking the rest to support the manager. Han Hari lunged at the army of undead, leaping over their skulls and reaching directly to the dungeon boss. Dealing a strong blow with her sword, we see how the undead managed to block her attack effortlessly and threw his head to obstruct the warrior's vision, creating an opening to strike her directly. Our protagonist appeared in front of the entire undead army and called Dullahan a knight with honor. He praised the dungeon boss for his flawless swordsmanship and expressed his desire to have a proper battle with him. Han Hari spoke to King Lionheart, telling him that the boss wouldn't die unless he was decapitated, but the young warrior said that this wasn't important. In a knight's battle, the winner was decided by honor. King Lionheart stood in front of the Dullahan Knight, challenging him to an honorable knight's duel. The Death Knight immediately lunged, wielding his large double-handed sword to strike the protagonist directly. We see how King Lionheart blocked the undead's attack with a single hand, deflecting Dullahan's strike and placing his sword at the knight's throat, making him understand that he had already won once. The Dullahan Knight immediately retreated to prepare a new attack against the king. He swung his large double-handed sword, but King Lionheart noticed that Dullahan was attacking with very light steps and countered him with a single maneuver of his hands. The Hunters Association group was astonished by Lionheart's move. No one could understand what had just happened, but Han Hari understood that Lionheart had shifted the balance of Dullahan's sword just at the moment of impact while executing a double cut on the undead knight. The king placed his sword again at the undead's throat, letting him know that this was the second time he had won the duel. The young warrior, with great domination over his opponent, asked the undead to return to his position, while Dullahan thought that it had been a long time since he had met a true knight who challenged him to a duel. Many would think that challenging him to a duel was just a trick to make him dismount, but Dullahan knew that these foolish people wouldn't understand a knight with excellent posture and the eyes of a veteran who had lived countless battles and the eyes of someone seeking for honor. Dullahan swung his sword again at the young warrior, but once again it was easily blocked by our protagonist, who again placed his sword at the undead's throat, letting him know that this was the third victory for the king. Dullahan thought he was facing the pinnacle of honorable knights and he didn't want to use necromancy against this opponent. He wanted to fight countless times against this glorious knight and do it in the right way as a knight, without necromancy, only his sword against his opponents, like when he used to duel against famous knights in his past life when he used to wander the world with honor, something he had forgotten after so much time. For the 10th consecutive time, our protagonist won the duel and let the knight know that it was once again his victory. Lionheart noticed that Dullahan's swordsmanship was improving and asked if he had regained memories of his old life. Dullahan replied that this battle had brought back the glorious days of his past life, and King Lionheart asked Dullahan if he would continue to fight. The undead looked at his army and wondered how long he had been causing massacres in this life, how long he had repeated fights without honor, and how he could end this damned journey so he could have no greater joy. We see the undead knight kneeling in front of King Lionheart, who praised him for regaining his honor as a knight. He told Dullahan that he would pray for him and that if he believed in a god, he would ask him to give rest to his poor soul, and if not, he would wish that the goddess guide him to the end of the garden. Before saying goodbye, Lionheart told the undead that he hoped to meet the great knight Dullahan in the Hall of the Gods someday. We watch as Lionheart offers divine light to the undead as the rough dark armor fades away, revealing the true knight Dullahan, who was at peace after escaping the torment that a soul in pain experiences. The scene takes us out of the portal into the wheat fields, where the association managers wonder how Lionheart managed to finish the dungeon. They didn't understand what the divine light was that made the Dullahan Knight disappear and why he didn't use it earlier to end him. Lionheart told them that if he had done it immediately, the Dullahan Knight would have vanished like a necromancer and not as a noble knight. The king said that Dullahan received an honorable ending and he would go get the loot he won in this honorable battle, which was the equipment left behind by the undead. The association managers were surprised to see all that valuable equipment on the floor. Then they told Lionheart it could be worth a lot of money, but the furious king destroyed it and labeled it as trash. The manager couldn't believe what he was seeing. They watched as millions of won were wasted before their eyes, and King Lionheart said that such an item would only bring chaos to this world. A few days later, Hanhari was carrying an elegant meal, looking tired as she thought about Lionheart being on Earth for only 4 days and already causing countless problems. First, there was a tax issue where King Lionheart criticized Hanhari for demanding taxes from a foreign king. He insisted that she, as a subordinate, should handle all these issues. Then there was a problem with some elders who asked how to make an offering to this new religion. King Lionheart told them that they would obviously give their crops as an offering to the goddess, and the elders couldn't believe he was asking for 90% of the harvest. Hanhari reassured them, explaining that the blessed crops had enormous value, and when she showed the price per bag to the elders, they couldn't believe each sack was so valuable and thanked the goddess for her immense generosity. The last problem was the residence Lionheart demanded. He couldn't believe they made him live in such a small place, and he asked for a huge bed with designs, servants present all day, and artwork he could appreciate. So Hanhari spent the entire night visiting 5-star hotels to rent a room, begging Lionheart to go to sleep. Returning to the scene in the king's room, Hanhari hands the meal to the king, who asks her if she has eaten anything. He tells her that she should never skip meals as it's important and asks her to sit. Hanhari thought that the kind king might share something with her, but instead, the king questions what she thinks she's doing and why she hasn't cut his meat yet. Hanhari asks if he doesn't plan to share anything with her, and Lionheart responds, asking in what world a king shares his food with a commoner. Later, they check out of the hotel as the Hunters Association approved a budget to keep Lionheart in the country. Hanhari asks the king what he plans to do with the loot from the last dungeon, and Lionheart replies that he had already told her that she, as his servant, should take care of it. However, he liked the cloak, so he wanted to keep it. When they arrive at the new residence, they see a luxury hotel, and the girl asks the king if he doesn't find the place luxurious, mentioning that it's much closer to the Hunters Association, while Lionheart only thinks about the strange structures of this world. When he's about to enter the hotel, a man recognizes the girl. Hanhari was concerned because this trip was supposed to be confidential, and she asks the man who he is. He introduces himself as the director of Future Foods, one of the 3 most important companies in Korea. He then recognizes the young king as the survivor everyone has been talking about lately. The director, delighted to meet Lionheart, extends his hand to greet him, but the king responds how an inferior dares to ask him for a handshake, only to ignore him completely and head to his room. In the room, Hanhari asks the king why he ignored the director of Future Food, and Lionheart replies that he's probably a man pursuing profits. Hanhari immediately thinks of the blessed fields that the king had created. Meanwhile, in another room, the director was furious about the way Lionheart treated him, calling him an arrogant barbarian. The director asks a researcher if that crop was really so important, and the researcher replies that when they went to the field, they saw a dying dog come back to life after eating some seeds. The director thinks about all the profits the ability to bless crops could bring, but changes his mind when he remembers how King Lionheart called him inferior. The director's secretary asks him to calm down, emphasizing the extreme importance of securing those crops for the company's future. The director thinks of Lionheart as a barbarian who doesn't have the ability to do business in Korea. He is just another savage survivor from an uncivilized world. We see how since arriving on Earth, Lionheart set 3 goals for himself. Firstly, it was necessary to spread the faith. There are so many gods in this world that there isn't a truly important sacred power. In order to have one, there needs to be a single belief propagated, and the believers following that religion must increase. Secondly, the reconstruction of the Knights of the Holy Grail. In this world, there isn't a combat group using sacred power. If Lionheart is the guardian and demigod, the Knights of the Holy Grail are saints who live just below him to strike terror in demons. Finally, and the most important thing, it's to annihilate all the evils on earth in order to spread the faith, restore his position of sanctity, and transform common people into Knights of the Holy Grail. The girl bursts into Lionheart's room to tell him that someone has requested a formal audience, and the king tells her that if they followed the formal protocol, there would be no reason not to be heard. There were two men and the director of Future Food who thanked him for the opportunity to meet with him. Lionheart remembers he was the greedy man he saw that morning in the hotel reception. The company director thought it's no problem to bow to this barbarian as long as he gets benefits for the company. The men placed a metal box in front of Lionheart as a gift, and the director asked our protagonist to please accept this gift as an apology for the morning's incident, while the director thought it was an incredible gift that a barbarian like him had never tasted. The king interrupted the director, saying that seeing his gift as an apology for what happened in the morning, he would accept it gladly, and the director became furious with the way the king said he would forgive him but masked his emotions with sweet words to maintain his facade. The king said it was bothersome to explain about etiquette to an inferior and asked Han Hari to open the box's contents. The girl approached the metal box, pressed a button that opened the device, revealing its contents. Han Hari couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was a large number of state-of-the-art weapons developed by the director's company for the king. The director told Lionheart that these objects were of unique grade and could be of great help for his activities as a hunter. The girl was surprised since that amount of weaponry wasn't something you could easily obtain, but unlike the rest, our king viewed this equipment as low-level trash. The director and Han Hari couldn't believe that Lionheart referred to these items as garbage weaponry, but the king told them that a weapon not bathed in star energies or blessed by a divine being couldn't be considered good enough. They would only be useful for hunting some animals. Confused by the king's words, the director wonders if Lionheart wants the weapons to receive a blessing from the Vatican, but Lionheart immediately replies that he doesn't trust the director because traders are known for promoting their products, but to give them a clear answer, he'll demonstrate what a real weapon is next to his toys. The company director is surprised to see Lionheart summon a sword from thin air, but then he realizes it's a rusty weapon and he politely asks if Lionheart could show them the splendor of his weapon. The director asks Han Hari to choose a weapon from the arsenal. She selects the famous Dawn sword, a weapon she has coveted for 4 long years because it's the masterwork of Park, a sword forged for 10 days with the hidden energy of the sun in a dungeon. Lionheart brings his divine sword closer to Han Hari's Dawn sword and signals her to clash swords. Immediately, the girl channels the maximum power of the Dawn sword, swinging it with all her might, but her sword shatters into thousands of pieces upon colliding with Lionheart's sword. The king tells them it was a waste of time, as he wasn't even scratched. Then the king informs the company director that he'll reduce their audience time to 3 minutes from now on. The director couldn't hear what the king was saying, as he was only thinking about what happened to the best sword on the planet. Then the director, without any other ideas, directly tells our protagonist that he's here to obtain the patent for the rice seeds, and he offers a tremendous sum of money for the patent, believing that the cultivation benefits are even more valuable than what he's willing to pay. The king calmly asks the company director if he understood that he wanted to buy the seeds with money. The director thought the king was falling into a trap and tells him that all they need is for him to sign a contract so Future Foods can distribute them, even at a high price. The king softly tells the director that he's just a humble merchant and then shouts at him, accusing him of blasphemy in his presence. The company director and his companions feel a threatening presence. They feel like they're going to die at that moment, but they are interrupted by the king, who asks the group of merchants to confess their sins. The trembling company director kneels and tells the king he doesn't know what he did wrong. Lionheart calms down and calls him an ignorant being who dares to seek profits from products of a deity that he doesn't even believe in. Later, Hanhari asks the king if it's okay to let the director go. From Lionheart's perspective, he's just a humble merchant, but in reality, he's a man with much influence in the country. But the king tells her not to worry and asks if there's anything else pending on her agenda. The girl replies that the association called to invite him to retake the measurement test, making it easier to work on dungeon missions. Lionheart responds that it's ridiculous to test a king. Hanhari asks then why he asks to contact them. Lionheart replies that he wants to recruit soldiers, and that will be her responsibility. The scene takes us to the Hunters Association, where an independent hunter named Ku meets an old team leader who asks if he's here to retake the measurement test. Then we see how Ku is registering at the counter. The old man asks if he thinks he'll rank up this year, and Ku replies that he'll have to try, thinking that he's been trying for more than 10 years to rank up. The old man suggests he join his mining team, but Ku replies that he's been trying for too long, and he won't give up now, because Ku knows he has a family to take care of, and for that, he needs to enter more challenging dungeons. Then both of them are impressed when a blonde man enters the room. They wonder if he's European or a foreign worker. Both colleagues think he looks like someone from the royal family and approach to greet our protagonist in another language. The king, noticing the old man and tells him not to dare speak to him. The old man asks Ku if he said something that might upset him, and Ku replies that it's the foreigner's fault. We see how Lionheart directs a gaze at Ku that sends chills down his spine. He immediately wonders what this pressure he's feeling. It's a sensation akin to drowning or being suffocated, but then the receptionist of the association calling Ku for his interview for the measurement test. Lionheart is disappointed, thinking that coming here to recruit soldiers was a bad idea. They're all weaklings, and most of them are idiots who are just taking their measurement test. We see how Lionheart enters an interview room. 3 men were waiting for him, confirming his name, but Lionheart tells them he's a commoner and to address him as Your Majesty. The confused interviewer asks Lionheart if he can place his hand on the measurement device, but the king looks at the device contemptuously and replies this is nonsense. Lionheart tells them how can a commoner try to test the honor of a knight. The interviewer tells him that they won't be the ones evaluating him, it will be the magical tool, but Lionheart replies that only gods can judge a true knight. The interviewer then asks him what he's doing here, and Lionheart tells him that he came to recruit soldiers, but they're all trash. Then the king asks them what the next test is. The interviewers, surprised that a talent scout would openly say he came to recruit hunters, reply that the practical test is going to take place in a dungeon, and Lionheart says in that test it will be easier to detect talent and reply that he'll observe the test. The scene takes us to the Soul Dungeon, where Ku thinks that this year's evaluation is similar to last year's, and to achieve a good result, he has to actively participate this year. We see the group of newcomers entering the test together, including a pair of siblings and a 60-year-old elder. Then, Lionheart makes his entrance into the portal, and Ku realizes that this year he's in a group with novices. Ku tries to take charge and asks the group to share their specialties. He introduces himself as a warrior with 10 years of hunting experience, specializing in damage distribution. The brother, Shin, specializes in using shields and spears, while his sister Naeon specializes in daggers but can also use a bow. Ku worries because the newcomers don't even have a proper hunter's education, and he asks if they attended any training centers, but the siblings boast about their 3-month period in the hunter's academy. Then, an elderly man named Gang, with 5 years of hunting experience specializing in close combat with fists, introduces himself. Ku thinks he's an inexperienced elder, and overcoming the age gap will be challenging. Ku asks the protagonist if he's a foreigner, but Lionheart looks at the group and responds that he won't fight because it's not fair to battle against the weak. The hunter feels more surprised by his accent than his response. The team enters the forest where the examiner instructs them to hunt 50 kobolds, and if they face any problems, the examiner will handle it. Ku feels worried about the suitability of the current team for this test, and during a team meeting, the hunter asks Lionheart if he has a weapon. As any of the team see the king's weapons, Neon offers to use her bow, but Lionheart, angered by the sight of it, throws it away, stating that a bow is a coward's weapon for a king. Ku knows this is his last attempt and there's a high chance of failing this year, so he takes the lead again and suggests the group hunt in a different area, and the team accepts, trusting in Ku's experience. Shin questions why we'll go there if there would be many kobolds at the end of the path, but the hunter explains that it's not wise to fight all the kobolds at once, as they might get surrounded. He suggests attacking the kobold caves by creating a fire and smoke to force them out, allowing the group to handle them one by one. Ku believes his careful planning gives them a slight chance to pass this year's exam, and as they progress, they encounter a group of kobolds in the forest. The kobolds charge directly at the group, and Ku tells Shin to prepare his shield to block the attack. We see a kobold being taken down by Shin's attack, and he thinks these creatures are foolish for attacking in a straight line, but Neon shouts at him to pay attention while we witness a kobold coming directly at the Lancer with an aerial attack, managing to knock down Shin. Ku urges the group to act as quickly as possible, and Neon successfully brings down 2 kobolds with her bow, while the elder hits the kobold that knocked down Shin to rescue him. The hunter is relieved that everyone is unharmed and asks them to continue the journey. The team gathers after the battle against the kobold group, and Shin apologizes to the team for not paying attention to the enemy, but Ku thanks Neon for managing to bring down the 2 kobolds in order to save his brother. Ku starts to think there's still a chance to pass the exam despite his initial doubts. He thinks it's not a bad group after all, except for our protagonist, who did nothing in the fight. Shin asks Lionheart why he did nothing during their battle. The examiner responds that he stayed behind watching the fight and doesn't need to be worried because his attitude will be reflected in the final evaluation, so Ku relaxes a bit more, knowing that it won't affect his own assessment. In the next stage, the team discovers the Kobold Cave and the group prepares a bale of straw to light a fire at the entrance of the cave. The hunter plans to use the same strategy of creating a fire, but Lionheart interrupts him and questions the effectiveness of this tactic. Ku answers that he made this strategy 3 times before and all of them ended well. The king said it's good to have experience, but it's not enough for relying solely on his experience. Ku becomes angry and challenges Lionheart, asking about his own experience. While he starts the fire and shows us how the fire generates smoke, the hunter asks the group to be prepared when the kobolds leave the cave. We see how a group of kobolds run out the cave to attack the intruders, but Neon and the elder attack them with long range, beating the beast in the moment. Ku starts to believe his strategy is flawless. His methods were not wrong. However, their situation becomes dire when the hunter hears a strong sound when the kobold captain, a C-class monster, appears in front of the team, and they wonders why such a powerful beast is in this part of the dungeon. Ku instructs Neon to handle the kobolds from the cave while he and Shin face the captain of the beast. The hunter was hoping that Shin would be able to block at least one blow from the beast, but when the leader of the kobolds stands in front of Shin, the warrior immediately feels overwhelmed by the beast. Ku asks him to pay attention, but he knows that Shin is scared of the enemy, and in that state he won't even be able to block one attack. The kobold leader swings his sword to remove Shin's shield, and Ku yells him to escape, but Shin is paralyzed with fear. The hunter wonders why the examiner isn't intervening, considering they are in grave danger. Unable to bear seeing Shin's life in peril, Ku bravely rushes to confront the beast, using the shield to block its attack, and with great effort, the hunter manages to deflect the captain's blow momentarily. Before the kobold can strike again, Ku doesn't know if he can stop the beast's attack. He thinks that will be the place where he will die, but before receiving the attack he hears our protagonist, who congratulates him for his actions, stopping the attack with his bare hands. Lionheart tells Ku that he wants to see him to try again, but Ku couldn't respond. He was just thinking how the foreigner was able to block that attack with his fingers. The king tells him to raise his shield again. He is asking him to face the beast. Ku wonders if he is talking to him, and the king tells him that he wants to see him have his attack, but now he wants him to counterattack after blocking, and Ku tells the foreigner to stop talking nonsense and read the atmosphere. The king calls him insolent. How he dares to argue when he has the honor of being trained by the king. Lionheart tells him that his future generations will be proud that he was guided by the Knight of the Holy Grail. The king yells again at him to raise that shield and block the beast's attack. Ku thinks that if he doesn't do it he will be finished anyway. The leader of the kobold loses interest in Ku and looks directly at the protagonist, who managed to stop his attack. Lionheart looks at the beast in the eyes and asks him if perhaps the dog had lost its head with a threatening tone. The kobold knew that he would not be a match for that individual, and by natural instinct he gave up and prepared to attack. The hunter managed to stop the attack of the beast, but he thought that he almost lost his shield with that strong attack. King Lionheart calls him stupid and asks him if it is necessary to have to stop the attack by force. When he faces a more powerful enemy he does not have to do it head on, he has to destabilize him and attack his openings. King yells at him not to be stupid as we see Ku thinking about his next move. The kobold was going to cut him in half when Lionheart helps him dodge the attack. The king tells Ku not to ruin his talent, he has to free his potential. Ku could only think that in his last 10 years in Class D he had never heard those words of support to someone without talent. Ku steels himself and thinks that he really can win. The beast again prepares a strong attack with his weapon, but Ku manages to follow the king's advice and deflects the kobold's strong attack. He is happy to achieve the feat, but is interrupted by a strong blow from the beast that sends Ku flying. Lionheart says that he must be retarded for not seeing that attack, and it's obvious he still has a long way to go. The scene takes us to the Hunters Association, where King Lionheart questions the examiner about his presence in the dungeon with them. The president explains that the examiner used magic to conceal his identity. The president asks the protagonist if he accomplished his goal of evaluating the team. Lionheart remarks that only one candidate did things right and adds that he has no plans to go to another country, so there's no need for such actions. The president reveals that he has discovered his true identity and expresses relief that Lionheart won't leave the country after proving his strength by defeating the kobold leader like he was a toy. The president suggests that if the protagonist wants to establish a guild, they can assist him, and according to the president, there's no better way to attract talent than the fame of a powerful guild leader. Then the president tells Lionheart that a red-level dungeon has recently appeared in Korea, which has remained unconquered for a year due to the boss inside. The scene takes us a week in the past. We see a guild entering the red-level portal with a team of 6 people. The warriors think that this dungeon was a modern civilization even more advanced than the Earth. The archer of the group thinks it is similar to the Earth in the future. The warrior thinks it is a cyberpunk world, so the leader asks them to organize a strategy to complete this mission, and he suggests that they use the tallest building in the city to reconnoiter the map. Once at the top, the leader asks the warrior if he sees anything out of the ordinary, but the warrior tells him that he doesn't see anything. There are no monsters and there are no NPC either. The guild leader thinks it is strange that you can't even see a monster in this city and asks the group to meet to start the raid. When the leader is giving instructions to complete the dungeon, when he is pierced by a strong ranged attack. The group is horrified when they see the scene of their leader being impaled and shouts that everyone take cover from the shooter. It is the boss of the dungeon who begins to attack the group of warriors with heavy weapons. The young man of the group thought about what they could do against someone who defeated the leader with a single attack. We see how the archer of the group tells the vice leader that she cannot see the enemy because of the dust that caused the explosion. The young warrior orders the group to retreat from the initial position because the building is collapsing, and the archer asks the warrior what they will do with the leader's body. The young man tells him to escape to save their lives, and then they will return to recover it. While he asks the archer to go ahead to check if there are no traps at the exit, the archer goes ahead of the group, tells them that the exit seems safe, but once we see her outside she stops completely. The archer wonders why her throat feels harm. Her body was cut into several pieces, and the warrior wonders what happened. There were several metal cables spread throughout the city like invisible traps. The warrior shouts to the group that they have to escape the dungeon as soon as possible. He asks them to put mana into their weapons to cut the cables and escape. We see how the group of hunters are being observed by Jet Spinner from the ledge of a building, who launches an attack aimed at the group of warriors who receive the direct impact of the attack, causing the death of the group and the amputation of one of the young man's arms. The warrior shouts at Jet Spinner to come out of his hiding place, not to be a coward and show his face. Jet Spinner comes out of his hiding place and shows himself in front of the young warrior, who cannot believe the leader of the dungeon is a machine. The young man shouts the monster that annihilated his entire group in a cowardly way, and Jet Spinner launches an attack against the warrior to end the life of the last member of the exploration team. The scene takes us to the present, where 2 of the best 10 hunter guilds in Korea are preparing to enter Jet Spinner's dungeon, and also Lionheart's group, made up of 2 people. Han Hari is embarrassed and asks the protagonist if they can enter the dungeon now. While our patient king drinks the tea before entering, the king asks her what the name of that delicious tea is. Han Hari tells him that it is a well-known barley tea. The king asks the girl what she thinks of the situation. Han Hari answers that she is worried about whether everything will turn out well in this mission. The girl tells the protagonist that if everything goes well, he will not have to go out to fight, but that will not earn him the fame his new guild needs. Lionheart responds that indeed that would be the best. The fact that a king does not have to participate means that the situation was not that serious, and asks Han Hari what she thinks is the role of a king in his world. The girl tells him that ruling, but the king replies that is obvious, but it is also a task that anyone can perform. Then Han Hari tells him that he is finding himself in the vanguard with the knights, while thinking that in the last 2 attacks the king only appeared at the most critical moment. The king tells him that indeed the task of a king is to be the last bastion, and the fact that a king has to act in person is an insult for the knights. It means that the severity of the situation has escalated to a level above them. The king tells Han Hari that because of the weak earthlings it seems that the king will have to work again. The girl tells him that in this occasionally there should be no problems, since they have the 2 best guilds in Korea to complete the dungeon, but the king mocks Han Hari, telling her that although these leaders are strong, they are not people who know war. They are leaders who have always been safe. They have only fought a few times. Lionheart tells Han Hari that they call themselves hunters, but they have not even identified monster patterns or planned attacks in response. The king tells the girl that they are ridiculous, since that Jet Spinner guy seems like an enemy that has no pattern. He adapts to the circumstances while hunting his prey. In his opinion, the enemy of this dungeon is an innate warrior. The scene shows us Jet Spinner's memories. We see how a researcher was dying and was asking Jet Spinner for one last order, asking him to eliminate all the factors of uncertainty that invade the city. Returning to the present, Jet Spinner begins a flurry of attacks against the 3 groups that entered the city. The warriors shouted that the attack had begun and everyone need to seek for shelter, but Jet Spinner had an infrared camera to detect people by heat. The robot begins to attack all the groups hidden in the ruins. While the group of warriors looked for a place to protect themselves from the enemy fire, they could not believe the damage that a single attack had caused, leaving several warriors in the group dead under the rubble. Jet Spinner estimated that 23% of the warriors had died in that attack, and he is prepared to eliminate the rest of them when he is attacked by the leader of one of the guilds, who swings a large hammer to hit the robot. Jet Spinner looked damaged by the leader's blow, so the robot calculates that it is better to get rid of that intruder first, but he does not realize it was too late, because a rear attack from a member of the guild was coming from behind that hits the robot squarely, throwing it to the floor of the city and causing serious damage to Jet Spinner. We see how the robot is attacked with thunder magic. Was the leader of the 2nd guild who entered the battle and used lightning magic to overload the robot's circuits, but Jet Spinner, finding himself cornered, activates the use of limited resources to confront the warriors. He starts by activating all the cameras in the city to recognize the position of the enemy. Then the robot prioritizes attacking the leader of the 2nd guild, since it sees him as a dangerous enemy, and begins its retreat plan by jumping over buildings and shooting fire at will. The leader of the second guild shouts to the team to activate its field ability. He asks the group to gather together and activates a barrier in order to block the robot's attack without much difficulty. He tells the team that it is a tool that creates a distortion force that deflects bullets, but Jet Spinner realizes that there is a magnetic field that deflects its attacks, so it begins the necessary calculations to measure the level of deviation and correct the angle of attack. The robot begins a second fire that passes through several members of the hunting team, and the leader of the second guild could not believe that the dungeon boss will analyze the angle of attack to arrive accurately. We see how the guild shield asks the leader to remove the magnetic field that makes it difficult to know the trajectory of the attack. The leader tells them that he is going to deactivate the barrier, but he wants everyone to run for cover from the attacks. When the leader deactivates the barrier, the squire shouts for everyone to stay still. The squire was able to see through Jet Spinner that he had planted multiple cables around the city. The members thought that if they had escaped they would all be dead, and we see how Jet Spinner uses the cables to move through the air with the intention of attacking the intruders again. The guild leader could only think that he was deceived by the robot that calculated a whole plan to leave them locked in that position. Jet Spinner was going to launch a powerful attack against the group of invaders when he was interrupted by a horse that ran straight to the battlefield. We see how our protagonist is relieved to see his dear companion again. Riding the horse in front of all the hunters, the king tells Jet Spinner that he admires his bravery as a warrior to fight so many enemies. For that same reason he will give him the honor of meeting him and fighting him directly. Jet Spinner prepares to launch an attack at 13% of its power to kill the intruder, but our protagonist takes out a weapon from another space and charges directly at the enemy. The robot manages to fire a missile directly at Lionheart. Our king tells him that as a knight he will not tolerate cowardly attacks from distance and charges head-on against Jet Spinner's missile. We see how King Lionheart manages to penetrate the enemy's attack and pierce the robot with his holy sword. Then Jet Spinner gets confused because he cannot calculate with their technology what just happened was something that logic could not prove. Jet Spinner's artificial intelligence judged that the weapon he used was outdated. Speed was the only anomaly, but there was a limit to how much damage his attack could cause. It was a threat he didn't even have to protect himself. Jet Spinner goes back to review the recordings, where 3 seconds before the impact a cover is formed around the intruder. It was a different pattern than what has already been recorded before. Even if he blocks the initial impact, it will be eliminated with a follow-up pressure, and before the impact the bullet rebounded for no reason. There was no blocking process or follow-up pressure, the bullet simply rebounded without precedent. A miracle occurred in front of Jet Spinner. It was the art of imposing rules on the world itself. Jet Spinner thought that this situation cannot be analyzed with logic, they are incomprehensible physical phenomena. For that reason the robot decided to increase the threat level of the intruder to the maximum level of danger and decided to make a strategic retreat, achieving the escape. The scene shows us how Jet Spinner is in his base making adjustments to his weapons, repairing damaged joints and replenishing ammunition. The robot, after fighting with Lionheart, decides to allow the use of biological weapons to fulfill his last mission left by his owner. Jet Spinner was ready to fight again, and according to his calculations there are now possibilities of eliminating the primary threat of intruders. Meanwhile, a group of hunters who entered the center of the city see a cannon 250 meters away that appears to be Jet Spinner. The leader of the group tells his team to prepare for battle, but when he turns around, upon hearing no response from his team, the leader sees how everyone was dismembered by the tension cables. The leader turns to hear a sound and swings his sword to hit Jet Spinner, who was no longer in the alley, but we see how the team leader is impaled by the tension cable of the robot that was just playing with him. Then Jet Spinner detects that one of the intruders is escaping, but by measuring his threat level he knows that there is no risk to easily annihilate this enemy. The hunter manages to escape to a cemetery where he trips and is reached by the robot. The young man says that he does not want to die. Jet Spinner remains still without making a move. Before setting foot in the cemetery he begins to remember his owner again, who in that same cemetery tells him that soon she also will be buried in the cemetery and she will become part of the city to always be together. Then she asks Jet Spinner if after her death he will be able to continue protecting the city. The robot gets confused by the order of her owner and configured the system in order to fulfill its mission. The robot decides that it is essential to take care of the city before eliminating the intruders, leaving the young hunter alive. We see how he returns to his base of operations to recharge energy. The robot is calculating the number of remaining enemies when it detects that an intruder has entered its base. Jet Spinner turns around to see who it is, and our protagonist makes his appearance in front of the robot. Lionheart considers him to be the embodiment of chivalry. He tells Jet Spinner that he hates cowardly ambushes and hopes for a fair battle. Then he asks the robot if he is done with the repairs, but Jet Spinner acts immediately, causing a large explosion in the room. Our protagonist tells him that being a machine he does not fight fairly, but hopes that at least he doesn't abandon the virtues of a warrior. We see how Lionheart takes out his sword and tells the robot that the embodiment of chivalry never breaks, that temperament makes him strong and he was chosen for that same temper. He asks the robot if it is unreasonable to expect honor from a machine, but Jet Spinner, before letting him speak again, launches a rapid-fire attack that is completely blocked by our protagonist. Jet Spinner realizes that the same physical abnormality occurred as the last time, decides to change to a refractive movement strategy, changing position as quickly as possible until finding an opening to shoot from different angles. Lionheart calmly decides to hit the floor of the room to lift the rocks and use them as a shield. Jet Spinner stays analyzing the situation, but jumps to avoid the sword that our king threw in advance. Knowing the final position of the robot, Jet Spinner manages to dodge the intruder's attack by thousands, but our king was already charging directly against the robot again. Jet Spinner sees the level of danger and automatically decides to retreat with a fire attack in order to repel the intruder. The robot finds it incomprehensible that after all those attacks he was not affected and begins to escape throughout the city while thinking that it is not possible that a person on horseback can reach that level of speed. Jet Spinner could not leave the intruder behind, so he decided to use a pillar to gain momentum and launch himself directly towards the intruder with a massive attack while both warriors collided, deflecting their attacks. Jet Spinner was unharmed by the king's attack, but our protagonist did not flinch and decided to attack the robot before he decided to escape again with a flurry of shots that failed to reach Lionheart. We see how our protagonist jumps over the rubble that falls from the building to gain height and reach Jet Spinner in the air. The desperate robot begins a new attack of rapid shots that are completely blocked by the king. The knight charged with a large attack that hits Spinner, leaving half of his body completely destroyed. The scene takes us in the robot's memories, where the owner asks him never allow what is sealed in the city to escape, so as a last resort Jet Spinner initiates the self-destruct sequence by detonating his entire body to eliminate the greatest threat. The scene shows us the robot's past memories, where it was initially built to defend the city from the attack of some demons that were destroying and murdering all the citizens. We see how the robot's only purpose was to destroy these threats by providing support in the attack. The scene shows us that in the past there were multiple Jet Spinner designs that had the mission of protecting the city. They were known as guardians and protectors and considered them as heroes. They were a symbol of hope and soon known as the Knights of Steel. The army of guardians spent their days fighting the demons under the authority of the commander. They spent so many years protecting until one day there was nothing left to protect. Then the researcher was the last one standing, and she asked the last guardian to protect the city and not allow anyone to reach the energy orb. Thus he spent his entire life protecting a city with 0 inhabitants, complying with the last order of its owner. Our king approaches Jet Spinner's destroyed body and tells him that he is happy to see him still alive. The king asks him if what he was protecting was that dark orb. He tells him that it is the Jewel of Wisdom, an object that should not exist in this world, and approaches to destroy it, but is stopped by Jet Spinner. Our king asks him if he is still willing to fight with that body. The king wants to know how long the robot has been protecting this orb. Lionheart tells Jet Spinner that it is a loyal knight and all living beings should be grateful for his noble sacrifice. The king solemnly declared in front of the robot that his mission has already been completed while launching a powerful attack against the orb, destroying the entire structure. Our king tells Jet Spinner can now rest in peace, and we see how the relieved robot lightly listens to his owner's words of gratitude. The next day, our protagonist was talking with the director of the Hunter Association. Lionheart asks him if he has any problem with having destroyed the orb, to which the director tells him that by defeating Jet Spinner he has the authority to do what he wants. The king tells him not to feel bad since the orb was practically a poison. He explains that this jewel was a treasure created by the demons of wisdom to seduce humans. In other words, it was a tool of demons to grant wishes, but will gradually ask you for a higher price by devouring people with temptations such as eternal life in exchange for losing humanity to slowly transform into demons, a process that really does not take much time. The king tells the director that if they have found more orbs it would be better to destroy them, and the director replies that he will have to make some calls to the government as soon as possible. Lionheart tells him that it would be the most sensible thing to do, but that they have probably already been deceived with its power. We see how the king enters a laboratory of the Hunters Association. Lionheart asks the director if this is the place where he was buried, and the director responds that they have taken good care of him while they show us the body of Jet Spinner in the middle of the room. Lionheart approaches the body, telling him that an honorable knight must be buried and receive prayers, so that he goes to the Hall of the Gods, but before that it is important to consecrate his body, and the king uses the Holy Grail to bless the Spinner Knight to give him eternal rest. Lionheart sees a light emanates from the body of the robot, and in a few seconds he begins to move his body. Lionheart stops when he notices Spinner's movement. The robot's body was emitting sacred energy while gets rid of a large part of its body, and a small version of the original robot comes out. The king takes out his sword and says that it depends on him whether or not he will be chosen by the goddess. Lionheart puts his sword in front, emitting sacred energy, and swings his sword to open a portal that allows a glimpse of the goddess herself. Everyone in the laboratory is left speechless. They kneel unconsciously while everyone in the room had the same thought: that woman wrapped in golden light was not a human being at all. Lionheart kneels in front of the majestic figure of the Aryan goddess, and the goddess asks her knight why he had her called here. The king responds that the machine he sees in front of her is Jet Spinner, an honorable knight and an example for all knights. Lionheart hopes if the goddess can take him in. The goddess looks at Jet Spinner to ask if he completed his mission by demonstrating honor. Lionheart under oath guarantees that this was the case and tells her that if he did not exist, the robot could probably aspire to the position of king. The goddess, upon hearing her knight's words, says that there is nothing more to investigate. However, there is still something to be clarified. The goddess looks at Spinner and asks him if he would be willing to be her knight under Lionheart's command, if he would praise justice with honor and knowledge in order to destroy the evil. Jet Spinner turns to look at our king and responds to the goddess that he will fulfill his goal until the day he dies. He will support Lionheart to destroy the evil of this world. The goddess responds that she likes the new knight Sir Jet Spinner, and that as long as he is loyal to her she will be with him in his glory. We see how a light falls directly from the sky towards the robot, while the rest of the spectators contemplate the birth of a new knight of the Holy Grail, the second Holy Knight Sir Jet Spinner the robot. The scene takes us to the Magic Tower of the United States, where we see the master of the tower, Reynold, kneeling apologizing for not completing the mission. From an orb come the words of a being enraged by the ineptitude of his servant. The magician Reynold tells the voice that he couldn't do anything because a survivor named Lionheart was a variable they couldn't predict. The voice of the orb begins to insult the wizard, accusing him of making petty excuses, and, for a moment, stops to ask the wizard if he heard correctly when he told him that a man named Lionheart stopped him. The wizard does not understand what his master's question was, but the orb asks him to turn on the news quickly, and we see how the king appears on the news introducing himself as Lionheart, the king of Dragonia, while the orb lets out a terrified scream and wonders what the hell that knight is doing here. Reynold thinks that he has never seen his master so scared and wonders if it is because of the man from the news, but before asking for Lionheart his master tells him that he gives up and will not do anything else to bother him. The magician in the tower speaks to his master, who does not present a response and wonders what just happened now, as we see that the orb never made a response again. Here ends the first part of the story of the sacred knight Lionheart, who, after fighting the demons on his planet for 300 years, was found by the Earthlings who requested his support to take care of the demons that stalked the planet Earth. I hope you liked the first part of the story, but before saying goodbye, don't forget to leave your support with a like button, subscribe in order to receive more stories, and leave me in the comments if you want to have the second part of this story. Remember, this is your good friend Jake, and I wish you many amazing stories in your lives. Hope to see you again.